Today I'm going to do some kind of Blender beginner's guide to show all the new ones around the software, share some tips and tricks and overall functionality and navigation of the workspace. I hope this helps you begin with your next big project. Alright, to navigate around, you press the middle mouse to rotate, scroll up and down to zoom in and out, and shift middle mouse to move around. This way you can move in 3D in any direction you want. Okay, so next thing I'm going to show you is the left side of the screen. The first one is the select tool. If you click and hold, you're going to get these four options. The first one is to select single object. The second one is to select anything inside. The third is to select anything within the circle. And the fourth one is to select anything within the selection. Alright, the second option here is the 3D cursor. If I place the 3D cursor anywhere and add an object with Shift A, then it's gonna get placed where the 3D cursor is. Let's say I place the 3D cursor here, Shift A, object, it's gonna place it right here. Next thing is gonna be the move tool. With this one you can move objects around in any direction you want, X, Y, or Z. The third one is the rotate tool. This way you can rotate objects in any direction you need. Next one is the scale tool. If I click this, I can scale my object in any direction I want. And this one does all of them together. You can rotate, move, and scale at the same time. The next one is for doing sketches or like adding nodes, and this one is for measurements if you wanted to know how long a side is or if you're doing precise work. To save time, we can basically use shortcuts to initiate one of these actions. For example, if I select my cube and then press G, I can move it around. Quick tip: if you move something and wanted it to go back to the original position, you can right click to let it go and it will snap back. Okay, so you can press S to scale and R to rotate. Let's say you wanted to move something along a specific axis, you can press G to move it around and then Z to move it along the Z axis, X for X and Y for Y. The same goes for the scale. You can press Z to scale it along the Z axis, X, Y, and same goes for the rotation. Okay, the next thing I'm going to show you are going to be some functions at the top. The first one is the editor type. Here you see a lot of options. The ones I'm going to focus on today is 3D viewport and shader editor. So the 3D viewport is basically this view we're having right now, and to demonstrate the shader editor you got to pull up a new window. To do so, just go to an edge here, here, or here, it doesn't matter, and just pull it out. Here you can select the shader editor, and here you can change the shading, color, and texture of any object you want. Alright, so select your object, go on new. If you don't see this, you can scroll here until you find it and then click new. Here you will get all these options. To change the color, just click here and go for a color. All these other options, you can play around with these, bring down the roughness, turn it into metallic. Just play around with these, see what you get, and I'll probably make another video specifically explaining what each of these options do. Okay, so let's join this back together by right-clicking in the middle and select Join Areas and select the area you want to join into. Okay, so the next thing I'm going to show you is the edit mode, but before doing that, let's bring this cube up so you can see every side. To go into the edit mode, either click here and go into edit mode, or press tab on your keyboard. That will toggle between object and edit mode. Once in edit mode, you have three options. The first one is to manipulate single vertices. The second one is the edges. You can choose an edge and move it around. And the third one is for the faces. The shortcuts for these threes are 1, 2, and 3. That will toggle between edges, faces, and vertices. Here you can do anything you want. For example, if I press 3 to select a face and then press S to scale, you can make a side bigger or smaller. You could also press R to rotate or press G to move. You could also select the side and press E to extrude. Okay, so now let's go back into object mode, press X to delete and delete this cube. The way I did this backdrop, I'll show you just real quick. Go on mesh, plane, make it bigger, go on edit mode on the second option, or just press 2 to select the side, press E to extrude, Z to move it along the Z axis, and then click this side, Control B to bevel, scroll up the mouse wheel to get a lot of cuts, and left click to enter. If you wanted to make this more smooth, because here you can see the individual edges, just right click and go on shade smooth. Now you have a perfect backdrop. Okay, so next I'm gonna go over these options at the top. For the first one, if you choose the move tool and select the camera, you're gonna see the orientation. This is the front and back, up and down, left and right. You can change the direction by clicking this, and this will project it along the normals. This, for example, will align it with the 3D cursor. If you press N, you'll get these options. Go on view, and here you can customize the orientation of the 3D cursor, so you can move anything along any axis you want. Alright, so the next one is the pivot point. You gotta note that this point right here where the orientation is starting from is called the pivot point. If I rotate this camera, it's gonna rotate from this point. Like if I go up and down, left and right, or do anything with it. If I wanted to change the pivot point, I can come here and, for example, let's say 3D cursor. Now it's gonna rotate from the 3D cursor. Again, you can change the position of the 3D cursor right here. Alright, and these are other options as well. For the next one, it's the snap tool. The snap tool allows you to move your object in any way you want. For example, if I go on increments, it's gonna move them in little steps, up and down, left and right, doesn't matter. If I, for example, go on face, it's gonna stick it or snap it to the face you're moving closest to. Okay, so the next thing is the proportional editing. This one is really cool. If I click my backdrop, go on edit mode, here if I choose a side and press G to move it, it's gonna move only that edge. If I click the proportional editing and click G, it will move the sides within the circle with it. And if I scroll up and down, I can determine how big the circle will be. Right click to snap it all back in place. Alright. Okay, so the last thing I'll be showing you from the top are these options right here. I'll go over them from right to left. Before doing so, I'll press N to hide that right here. We don't need that. So the first thing is the render view. This is how your render would look like if it was being rendered. The second one will show you everything in color. The third one is without color, just the solid view itself. And the fourth one is the wireframe mode. This will make you see your mesh in detail and just every single edge in your scene. The next one is the X-ray mode. If I press it, it's gonna enable me to see through things. These two are basically for displaying things. For example, you see this move tool right here. If I press this, it's gonna disappear. If I press it again, it's gonna come back. This will basically hide every single one of these that are checked. If I wanted to just remove this, I could also just come here and find what I wanna hide. This is basically the same, but like for these lines, if I press this, it's gonna hide them, or I can hide any option that I want. Alright, so that's that. Okay, so lastly, I'll be going over some of these options briefly. So the first one is the render properties. Here you can choose your render engine. Either you choose Cycles or Eevee. Eevee doesn't have realistic lighting. It just simulates it. and Cycles actually has real-time reflections. So if I go on my render view, I can see this is rendered in Cycles. If I go on Eevee, we're gonna see a difference in the reflections. It just looks overall kind of different. I'll be going with Cycles because I like the look more. You can choose Eevee if you have a laptop or a PC that can't handle it. For the device, you can either go with CPU or GPU, depending on which one can handle those tasks better. I got a GPU, so I'll choose this. For sampling, it's pretty straightforward. The higher the sample count, the better looking image you'll get, but at the same time, it's going to be slower. So you want a low sample count for the viewport to view it, and a high sample count for the final render. When you go on render, click on render image, it's going to render you the final image. But also note that it's always better to go in steps of 64. So either choose 64, 128, 256, 512, 1024, and so on. If you render your image and you got a noisy image, you can always click this denoiser and it's going to denoise it for you, but keep the threshold low because you just want to minimize the noise and not destroy your image. Just for example, if I press this, the noise is going to disappear. Okay, so before proceeding to the other ones, I just wanted to go over this real quick. Let's go back to the material viewport shader first. Okay, so these are the axes. If I press one of these, it's gonna take me into the orthographic view, which means I'm looking from it exactly from one side. So this is the front. If I click this, it's gonna show me from the side. We can't see the backdrop because it's just so thin. So if I go on Y, we're gonna see it from the back, Z to see it from the top, and so on. Alright. This one, if you press it, you can zoom in accurately, but you can also do that by pressing Control and then middle mouse to zoom in and out. This one, if you press it, you can move around, which is the same as Shift and middle mouse. But this one, if you press it, you're gonna go into the camera view, which is why I needed to explain before explaining the output properties. Here you can change the resolution of the camera. For example, we could go 1080 by 1920. Okay, if we go back to the render mode, we can check this render region. Now it only renders inside the camera view. This makes your PC run smoother. By the way, you could pull this up and have your viewport right here and still have your camera view at the left. Okay, so the next I'm going to show you is the world settings. I have another tutorial for that called how to set up a scene. There I'm explaining how to load up an HDRI. An HDRI is basically a 360-degree image that functions as the light source. So these lighted are basically being transmitted into Blender. So the next one I'm going to show you is the modifier properties. If you click on Shift A, you can create a cube. Let's pull this up here, make it a little bigger. If we add an array modifier, we can duplicate these real fast and we can also give it an offset. If I wanted to go the other way, I could turn this into 0 and crank this up. Alright. The next one would be the bevel modifier. Here you can see the edges are getting beveled. You can select how much you want to bevel it and then the segments to make it smoother. You can just play around with these and see what they do. The next one would be the material properties. Here you can press new and give it any color. This is basically the same thing as the shader editor. If I go on here, you can see these are the same options. The only difference is that here I can add nodes to it. For example, if I click Shift A and search for texture, then I can add a noise texture. If I plug color into color, you're gonna see it has some kind of texture. Here you can customize this whatever way you want. You could give it a color by Shift A color ramp, place that in between, and you could choose two colors. For example, go on this color, make it purple, go on the other one, maybe make it something like this. It doesn't matter, it's just to demonstrate the difference between the shader editor and this is that here you have more options. One more thing I could show you is how to add stuff to your scene. For example, if you press Shift A, you can add any of these meshes and go from there. You could also add text. Let's add some text so I can show you something. Here's your text. Let's move this down so we can see. By the way, if you click anything and press Edge, it's gonna hide it. Alt Edge is gonna bring it back. So we're gonna hide this for now. Go on the text, go on edit mode. Here you can write anything. And then if you press tab, you're gonna be in your object mode. Now you can go on this setting and go to extrude. Now you have a 3D text and you can make it look smoother with this. If you press shift while sliding, you can go in smaller increments. All right. Alt H to bring it back. Also, one last thing, you can always download 3D models from websites like cgtrader.com or any other website. Here you will get formats like FBX. So all you need to do is go on File, Import FBX, and then you can import your model. If I go on my assets that I've downloaded, I can just choose, for example, this astronaut. And he's gonna be right here. Alright, I hope this helps a lot of you to get started with Blender. Let me know if you had any questions. I know this is a whole lot of information at once, but if you know these basics, it will be a lot easier to follow tutorials that you're gonna see in the future. Also, let me know what kind of tutorials you want so I can make things you can actually learn from. Alright, good luck, have fun.